All right, so we just learned what is inflation and deflation, and why should we care about inflation and deflation. Okay, so actually, so we have a separate chapter to discuss price level, and in that chapter, so we will study how we measure inflation and deflation. Okay, actually, so there are several different ways to measuring inflation. All right. So if you don't fully understand what we discuss here, don't worry, we have a separate chapter to discuss that. So here, just give you an overview. What are the main topic we will discuss throughout the rest of the semester? Right. Other things I want to emphasize is, so the inflation is related to business cycle, but this is only a short run phenomenon. In the long run, the overall price will be driven by changes in money supply. Okay. And here I just give you a piece of history, and so just give you a sense what is inflation and what that means to us. All right. So on the left hand side, this is a copy of an original receipt. So if you read this carefully, so you can see, so the receipt was printed in 1972, January 23rd. So I have a friend so who went to that hotel in 1972 for a conference. So this hotel is called Holiday Inn, and I did my research online. So this hotel, I mean, this building still exists. They just changed the name. Okay, now so the hotel is called One Santa Monica. Okay, so the same building but just different name. All right, and so if you look at the price back in 1972, the price was $15 per night. Now today, so this price is more than $200. But in 2020, because of the COVID-19, so the price may temporarily went down, but usually, so this price is close to $300. So the price was 15, now it's close to $300. So clearly you can see there's an increase in price. And this increase in price, we call it inflation. Right, so this is a piece of history. All right, so now the last things we will see in this chapter is international imbalance. Okay, so what is international imbalance? In modern days, no country is isolated. Maybe there are a few cases like Cuba or North Korea, okay? But pretty much all countries, they are an open economy, meaning they trade goods and service with other countries. You may want to ask yourself, why countries would like to trade goods and service with other countries? Okay, so the answer to that is because we can benefit from each other through trade. And why we can benefit from each other through trade is because we have comparative advantage. Okay? Everyone must have a comparative advantage on something, right? So that's a lesson we learned from the review of microeconomics. Okay? Now, if we look at the United States, so in 2013, or pretty much most of single years, the United States run a big trade deficit. But what is trade deficit? Trade deficit means we import more than we export. Or in other words, we purchase more goods and service in terms of value than we sold to foreigners. Okay, so that means we are running a trade deficit. On the other hand, so if we sold more than we purchased from the rest of the world, and then so we are running a trade surplus. Now, here is the issue. So as the United States, we purchase more from the rest of the world, or we purchase more from foreigners than we sold to them. Okay. Now the question is, where does the money coming from if we purchase more than we sold? Okay. The answer to that question is, so to finance this trade deficit, meaning, so we borrow from foreigners, or in other words, foreigners save in US. Let's say, for example, okay, so if US is running a trade deficit with Germany, let's just give you an example. So if Germany export lots of cars to United States, as a return, US export some service like computer service to Germany. But it turns out, so we bought more cars from Germany than Germans bought computer service from us. Okay. And then there's a trade deficit. But to finance the extra car we purchased from Germany, and we must borrow from Germany. And then the way we borrow from German, or equivalently, so German will save the actual dollar they earned in US market. So this is how we finance the trade deficit. On the other hand, so if we run a trade surplus, so for example, we sold more computer service to German than the car Germans sold to us. And then meaning we make more than we spend in foreign exchange. So then, so we have trade surplus. And then how we are going to deal with those euro we earn? We are going to put in German's financial market, right, to balance out everything. Okay, so this trade deficit and a trade surplus. Okay. Right. So these slides just show us the relationship between trade surplus and trade deficit with the saving. Right. So if a country has trade surplus, meaning they save. On the other hand, if a country has trade deficit, usually mean they borrow, right? So they borrow from foreigner. Okay? So a country runs a trade surplus, not necessarily a good thing. On the other hand, a country runs a trade deficit, not necessarily a bad thing either. So in other words, US, our economy is running a trade deficit. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so we run a trade deficit. It can be a good thing in the following two things. Number one, we specialize what we are, and then so we import goods. We are less specialized. Okay, so we benefit from trade. On the other hand, so we run a deficit, meaning so others will lend to us, or they're going to invest in our economy. Okay, so that's going to help our economy to grow further. Okay, but certainly, so if a country run a trade deficit and the country don't have sound economic fundamentals, that can be a problem down the road. Meaning, so this country must keep borrowing from the rest of the world, borrowing from foreigners, right? And eventually, so the debt burden will become too big to bear, right? Okay, so now let's look at a practice questions. This year, the value of a country's import is equal to 1.2 billion, and the value of its export is equal to 1.3 billion. This country is running a, so clearly you can see, so this country sold more than they bought from foreigners. And then, so this country is running a trade surplus. And as a matter of fact, so the trade surplus equal to 0.1 1 billion, okay, which is 1.3 minus 1.2, because we sold 1.3, we make 1.3 billion, and we only spent 1.2, okay, so we have 0.1 billion surplus. And then so what we are going to do with this surplus, because this is in foreign currency, and then so we are going to deposit in foreign financial market, or we are going to use that money to purchase foreign assets. That's from the standpoint of view of this particular country. Right? Now we look at a last case study, right, for this chapter. So this is a true story. So there's a company called Montgomery. Right? So this company survived the Great Depression. The way they survive the Great Depression is by cutting costs and hoarding cash. Okay? And remember, so earlier I mentioned in the short run, there is a correlation between business cycle and the price level. And usually when we in a recession, the price will decline or we have a deflation. Now, when there's a deflation, if you cutting cost and hoarding cash, so that's going to preserve the value of your cash, right? And actually, so the value of the cash will increase over time because there's a decline in price level. So that helped this company to survive the Great Depression. But then in 1940s, okay, and so these same company, they do the same things when they experience similar situation. But unfortunately, instead of in a deflation, we have inflation. But then, so the hoarding cash strategy did not work with inflation. And then it turns out, so this company did not survive or they failed, right? And here, this story just shows the importance of understanding the macroeconomy, understanding how the price level may change over time, and particularly with the business cycle, so that you can have the right business choice. Otherwise, you may fail in your operation, right? So this is a last case study. We will finish this chapter. Now, let me just quickly open the next chapter and give you an overview what we are going to do next. And then so I'm going to show you the video. So the next chapter, we will look at the measurement. Okay. So basically, so we finished the first module. In the first module, the main thing was a review of microeconomics. Now we are in the second module. And then in the second module, so what we are going to do, the entire module is devoted to understand the measurement of the economy, right? And so in terms of measurement, so we are going to measure how to measure the size of the economy, how to measure the labor market, how to measure the price level. Okay, so those are the most important things to understand our macroeconomy. Once we understand how to measure the macroeconomy, and then so in the next module, which is going to be the third module, we are going to make sense of the number. We try to understand so why there's a recession, okay, and why during recession the unemployment goes up, right? So that's in the third module. And then finally, so we will have the last module. So we will study what the government can do and how the government can help the economy, with particularly when we are in a recession, right? So in the immediate chapter, So this is the roadmap of the next chapter. Okay, so we are going to focus on the GDP, which is gross domestic product. So we are going to learn 3 different ways of calculating GDP. And after that, so we are going to differentiate between real GDP versus nominal GDP. And from the discussion of the difference between real GDP and the nominal GDP, we will study the price level or price index. And from the price index, and we will study how to calculate the inflation rate. But this inflation rate essentially refers to the inflation and the deflation, or just help us to see whether we have inflation or deflation, right? So that is the main topic of the next chapter. Now I'm gonna stop here. So let me just show you the video I supposed to show you. Okay, just give me a second.